The night. Everything changed. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the city streets into rivers of shimmering light. Sarah Mitchell gripped the steering wheel of her aging Honda, watching the windshield wipers struggle against the downpour. It was nearly midnight, and she should have been home an hour ago tucking her 7-year-old daughter Emma into bed. Instead, she was finishing her shift as a rideshare driver, trying to earn enough to cover next month's rent. Being a single mother wasn't what Sarah had imagined for herself. 3 years ago, her husband had walked out, leaving her with a mortgage she couldn't afford, and a daughter who still asked when Daddy was coming home. Sarah had sold the house, moved into a smaller apartment, and taken on every job she could manage. During the day, she worked as a receptionist at a dental office. At night, she drove strangers around the city, listening to their laughter, their conversations, their lives that seemed so much easier than her own. Her phone chimed with a new ride request. The pickup location was outside the Sterling Hotel, one of those expensive places downtown where a single drink probably cost more than she made in an hour. Sarah accepted the ride and navigated through the rain-slicked streets, her thoughts drifting to Emma, who was staying with their neighbor Mrs. Chen tonight. She hoped Emma had eaten her vegetables and finished her homework. When Sarah pulled up to the hotel's entrance, a doorman was supporting a tall man in an expensive suit. The man wasn't stumbling drunk, but his movements were slow and careful, like someone trying very hard to appear sober. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and even from a distance, Sarah could see the weariness in his posture. The doorman opened the back door and helped the man inside. "Thank you for taking care of him," the doorman said to Sarah, his voice filled with genuine concern. "Mr. Harrison had a difficult evening. He's a good man, just going through something." Sarah nodded, studying the man in her rearview mirror. He had settled into the seat, his eyes closed, his head resting against the window. There was something about him that didn't match the typical drunk businessman she usually drove. A sadness that seemed to run deeper than alcohol could explain. "Where to?" she asked softly. He gave her an address in one of the wealthy suburbs, a place where houses had gates and gardens, where people didn't worry about making rent or whether their car would start in the morning. Sarah entered it into her GPS and pulled away from the hotel. The city passed by in a blur of neon and rain. For several minutes, the only sound was the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the gentle patter of rain on the roof. Then, unexpectedly, the man spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough but clear. "I'm not usually like this." Sarah glanced in the mirror. His eyes were open now, staring out at the rain. "It's okay," she said. "Everyone has tough nights." He let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Tough doesn't begin to cover it. Today would have been my wife's birthday. She died 2 years ago. Cancer." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with grief. Sarah felt her heart constrict. She understood loss, understood the way it could hollow you out from the inside. "I'm so sorry," she said, and meant it. "I usually handle it better," he continued, as if he needed to explain himself to the stranger driving him home. "But tonight I went to this business dinner and everyone was celebrating and I couldn't pretend anymore. So I had a few drinks, maybe more than a few." Sarah drove carefully, giving him space to talk or stay silent, whatever he needed. She had learned that sometimes people just needed someone to listen, someone who wouldn't judge them in their weakest moments. "What was her name?" Sarah asked gently. "Catherine. Kate." His voice softened. She was everything good in my life. And now I have this big company, this big house, all this success she always said I'd achieve. And none of it means anything without her." They were crossing the bridge now, the city lights reflecting off the rain-darkened river below. Sarah thought about her own loneliness, the way her small apartment felt emptier every night after Emma fell asleep. Different circumstances maybe, but the same aching hollowness. "I have a daughter," Sarah found herself saying. "Emma, she's 7. Her father left us 3 years ago. Some mornings I wake up and I feel like I'm drowning, like I'll never be enough for her on my own. But then she smiles at me, or she brings me a drawing she made at school, and I remember why I keep going." The man, Mr. Harrison, the doorman had called him, was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're a good mother. I can hear it in your voice. Emma is lucky to have you." The simple kindness of his words made Sarah's throat tighten. She couldn't remember the last time someone had told her she was doing a good job. They reached his address, a sprawling modern house set back from the road, all glass and clean lines. Sarah pulled into the circular driveway. In the rearview mirror, she saw Mr. Harrison reach for his wallet, then pause. "I can't go in there tonight," he said quietly. "That house is full of memories, and tonight, I don't think I can face them alone." Sarah turned in her seat to look at him properly. In the dim light, she could see that he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe in his late 30s. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear, filled with a vulnerability that reminded her that wealth and success couldn't shield anyone from pain. "Do you have anyone you can call?" she asked. "A friend? Family?" He shook his head. "I've pushed everyone away. After Kate died, I threw myself into work, 14-hour days, 7 days a week. It was easier than dealing with the grief. But now—" He trailed off, looking lost. Sarah made a decision that probably broke every rideshare rule in the book. "My daughter's at a sleepover tonight. There's an all-night diner about 10 minutes from here. Why don't I buy you a cup of coffee? You can sober up a bit, talk if you want to, or just sit. Sometimes that's enough." He looked at her with something like wonder. "You would do that? For a stranger? Everyone needs kindness sometimes," Sarah said simply. "And tonight, maybe we both need not to be alone." His name was Michael, Sarah learned over terrible diner coffee and surprisingly good pie. Michael Harrison, CEO of Harrison Technologies, a company that made software she'd probably used without knowing it. But in the worn vinyl booth of the Starlight Diner, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a man who missed his wife, who was tired of pretending to be strong, who had forgotten how to let people in. And Sarah wasn't just a struggling single mother. She was someone with wisdom earned through hardship, someone who understood that survival required both strength and the courage to accept help. They talked until 3 in the morning, about loss and loneliness, about Kate and Emma, about the weight of responsibility and the fear of not being enough. Michael told her about the charity Kate had been passionate about, the one that provided art supplies to underprivileged schools. Sarah told him about Emma's love of painting, about how they couldn't afford lessons, but Sarah checked out library books on art techniques. When Michael finally felt ready to go home, he did something unexpected. He took out a business card and wrote his personal number on the back. "I'd like to stay in touch," he said. "If that's okay. I haven't talked to anyone like this since Kate died. You remind me that there are still good people in the world." Sarah took the card, turning it over in her fingers. "I'd like that too," she said. She drove him home again, and this time when he went inside, he didn't look quite so lost. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the lobby of Harrison Technologies, Emma's hand in hers. Michael had called the next day and the day after that. Their friendship had grown slowly, built on late-night phone calls and coffee meetings, on the shared understanding of people who had survived the worst and were learning to live again. Today, Michael was announcing a new initiative, the Catherine Harrison Art Education Fund, and he'd asked Sarah to help run it, offering her a salary that would change everything for her and Emma. More than that, he'd offered Emma a place in his heart, becoming the steady, kind presence she'd been missing. In the back seat of that rain-soaked car, Sarah had expected nothing more than to drive a drunk stranger home. She never could have imagined that her simple act of kindness would lead to this, not just financial security, but something far more valuable. A connection that reminded both her and Michael that life, even after devastating loss, could still hold unexpected moments of grace. As Emma tugged her hand excitedly, eager to see the art room Michael had created in the Foundation's headquarters, Sarah thought about that rainy night. She'd spent so long feeling invisible, driving through the city while other people lived their lives. But sometimes, she realized, it only takes one moment of choosing compassion over convenience, of seeing another person's pain and saying, "You don't have to face this alone." Sometimes, the simple act of showing up changes everything.